Thank you for joining us as we continue to walk through this book of James. As we walk through James, we're investigating what a genuine, authentic faith in Jesus Christ looks like, and how the life of the follower of Christ needs to be lived out. Today we get to the second half of chapter 3 and are going to discuss this concept of wisdom. Let's hear the words that James wrote in chapter 3, verse 13 through 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in meekness and wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but it is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exists, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. I think this passage helps us understand what true wisdom of the believer looks like. I think James begins by reminding us that an authentic faith guards against the fruits of the unwise. He begins by defining for us what earthly, worldly wisdom looks like. In fact, he gives some descriptions that are very intense and pointed. I think he begins by showing us the root of earthly wisdom. Notice that the root of earthly wisdom comes from the desires of the flesh. And he gives two descriptors that I think show this very well. One, he says that the root of earthly wisdom is bitter jealousy. It's this concept that jealousy ensues because we feel threatened by the wisdom and the ways in which the world lives and functions. The other describer he uses is selfish ambition. So he says not only is there jealousy, but there is this desire that is self-centered. There's this desire where the self wants to be elevated and glorify the self. It wants to live in self-gratification. And he says these are the two underlying markers that help us identify the difference between a worldly, earthly wisdom and a true, godly wisdom. And then he says, let me help you understand what this is. And he gives us the characteristics of earthly wisdom. James says that earthly wisdom is boastful. When he says boastful, he's saying that it's lacking the ultimate fulfillment of the desire that is there. And so its boasting gives a way of making it like it is justifying its own self. It's trying to say the things that I'm doing are fulfilling the needs I have. And so it boasts because it's truly lacking and it's trying to justify itself and convince itself that it's okay. Earthly wisdom is also dishonest. Earthly wisdom finds truth in relativism. This means that it finds truth as being whatever is true in the moment. Everything is rationalized, every truth is defined and ended by the outcome, and there's always the abuse of declaring that there's no such thing as absolute right and absolute wrong. That's in the ways of the world. But he also says it's worldly. Worldly means that it is wisdom and pressure in the way we engage because of horizontal pressure to live and keep up with the Joneses. It means that the world's ways of pursuing success, and we justify the activities of our lives to ultimately have the outcome the world says we should have. It says that worldly wisdom is natural, meaning that the root here points to the concept that's in the senses, meaning the earthly wisdom is based in the moment of it feels right. And then you have the term that he uses to characterize earthly wisdom as demonic. Ultimately, earthly wisdom is characterized by the term demonic because it is driven by darkness. And just like he says, here's the root, here's the characteristics, James then says, and here are the results that you need to understand are a reality to those pursuing earthly wisdom. And what are these results? One, disorder. That means he's talking about chaos, confusion. He's talking about worldly wisdom is always changing based on the moment because it's not resting in absolutes. It's also vile practice, he says, because it's petty, it's filled with hate, there's resentment involved. And so notice that earthly wisdom does not mirror anything that looks like Jesus. Then James says, on the contrary to this, an authentic faith lives out the fruit of wisdom that is from above. And he helps us again by giving us the root and the character and the results of such wisdom. He says the root from wisdom from above begins with good conduct. Good here points to the reality of moral conduct that is based in absolute morality and absolute truth. It means that the moral lines are set and lived within. And then he says it's not just that conduct is good, but it's gentle, with gentle works. This means that the activities of life are done because one's trust in the Lord and one's obedience to the Lord and confidence in the strength of the Lord. And so as a result, he says the root, unlike the root of the world, which was jealousy and self-ambition, the root of wisdom from above is good conduct and gentle works, which leads us to the character of the wisdom from above. What does the character look like? Well, there's actually 8 markers or descriptions that are given here. One is the characteristic of wisdom from above is pure. Pure indicates a purity in motives. It's a purity in external and internal activities. Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount said this, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Notice the key, purity. It's peaceable. Living in God's wisdom means that we seek to live in harmony and unity with Christ, absolutely, but also with one another because of who Christ is. It's different from the world. That's why he also said in the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." We see that as gentle is a characteristic of wisdom. The word here in verse 17 is one that is yielding to the desires of yielding the desires of the self and the rights of the individual and surrendering those to the higher true wisdom which comes from God and God alone. Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said these words, "But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone would sue you, take your tunic and let him have your cloak as well." Notice it's gentleness, different than the ways of the world. The other characteristic that he uses is reasonable. This means that it has a teachable spirit. Means it's ready to say, "Lord, I need to be changed. I need to be moved. I need to be transformed. Teach me," and be ready to be moved by the Lord. It's merciful, meaning that wisdom from above is driven by mercy because the mercy received, and thus it is extending mercy and compassion to others. It is understanding that the mercy received and is also mercy that is to be lived out. It's bountiful, meaning that wisdom from above puts mercy into action. And as a result, one can see the abundance of the fruitful deeds of their works because they're serving the Lord. They're impartial, which means that their individuals are looking to see people through the lens of Christ and not through the lens of self. And we notice it's sincere. This is the Greek term here for unhypocritical. It means that it is living in an unmasked way. It's being real and authentic for people. That's what godly wisdom looks like. And what are the results? Well, he gives 2, righteousness and peace. The seed of righteousness is sown, which means the gospel and the message of Christ is lived out that others may see. And peace, well, peace depicts the image of the individuals living in harmony with Christ and with one another. That's the result of wisdom that comes from above. And then as a result, I think we have to ask this question. How does this engage an authentic faith? Well, an authentic faith, a faith that is genuine in its relationship with Jesus Christ, is a wise faith. And so I think there's 3 questions we need to ask ourselves. I think these 3 questions help us, actually. The first question is this: do the words of our lips reflect God's words? That is, are we showing the wisdom that is from above that is controlling our life in the way that we speak? But not only that. I think the second question is, does our will reflect God's will? This means, are we living for the flesh and what we desire, or are we living for the desire of the Lord and His desire for our lives? And I think the third question is, do our ways reflect God's ways? That is, do the way that we carry out life mirror who Jesus is? These questions help us identify what wisdom we're living in and what is controlling our lives. We truly need to analyze the words, the will, and the ways of our life and ask ourselves, are they aligning with the words, will, and ways of Jesus? So which wisdom are you living in? Are you living by the desires of the flesh and what the world says is wise? Or are you living by the wisdom that's from above? Are you living and speaking the truth from the words of God, the will of God, and are you living in the ways of God? An authentic faith is desiring and challenging itself each and every day to live in wisdom from above. I hope that you will challenge yourself this week to grow in an authentic faith and ask yourself, am I living in the wisdom from above? We'll see you next week.